Right. Amazing. So hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Sage Live January of 2023. So before we start, just let me briefly explain what the Sage Journey is all about and how Sage Live fits into that category. So Sage Journey is a program whose mission is to inspire and encourage students to explore STEM careers for their future. We do this by offering free summer camps. I know you all know all about that. But we also have paid internships, professional growth sessions, and many opportunities to connect with professionals who care about you and your amazing future. And Sage Live is a part of that Sage Journey. It is an online gathering of students who have attended summer camp and are curious about the next steps in their Sage journey. It's also a time to connect with Sage volunteers like moi, and it is held monthly via Zoom during the months of August and May. The topics covered are relevant to your journey, whether it is career related, like designing your life, that resume workshop, how to prepare for an interview, and new and exciting topics as quantum computing, AI, and machine learning. Today's Sage Live format will be a little bit different. We'll have a fireside chat with a special guest speaker, and a Sage 2022 alumni will be the moderator. So please feel free, again, to join in the conversation by asking questions in the chat, raising your hand, unmuting yourself to speak. This will be a great conversation. We want to hear everyone's questions and get everyone involved. So without further ado, I will present our moderator for the fireside chat, your very own, the one, the only, Kateton Campbell, better known to us as Joey. Yes, give her a round of applause. She attended Sage Camp last summer. She is currently dual enrolled at Foothill College studying mechanical engineering, work it out, and, and making progress in her associate's degree in science. She dreams of studying optomechanical engineering and one day building telescopes. I'm very excited to see all these telescopes you're going to build and to actually use them too. During her free time, she likes to photograph objects in space at the Foothill Observatory. And for our very special guest speaker today, I am so excited. Joining us all the way from across the pond, our speaker today is Dr. Jess Wade. This amazing woman is a research fellow working in the Department of Materials at Imperial College London. Her research considers new materials for optoelectronic devices. Don't worry, I'm pretty sure she's going to explain to us what all of that is today. And outside of the lab, Jess is involved with several science, communication, and outreach initiatives, including one that is very near and dear to my heart. She is committed to improving diversity in science, both online and offline. During her free time, she likes to edit Wikipedia. In fact, she has written over 1,000 Wikipedia articles on women scientists or scientists from underrepresented minorities. So if you've ever gone on Wikipedia and you see a scientist that looks like you, she probably had something to do with it. So welcome, Jessica. I'm so excited. I know we're all excited that you're able to join us today. And I am going to pass the microphone off to Joey. Sorry. One more thing. I'm sorry, Joey. I passed off a little bit too.
No worries. I'll give it back to you.
No, it's okay. Jess is amazing. Like, we want to make sure that we cover, I want to learn as much as possible from her. So we've kind of decided to split this conversation up into 3 parts. So the first part, we're going to talk a little bit about her personal journey and her career, how she got into studying what she's studying. Then a little bit on her work today. So if you have any questions about the materials that she works on, that will be the time to do that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about those Wikipedia articles because we have to. So just to keep in mind if you have questions formulating. And again, me and Joey will be here to keep it flowing and make sure everyone's questions are answered. All right, Joey, without further ado, for real this time, take us away.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dominique. I'm so excited to be here today, and I'm so excited to talk to you, Jess, and get some information for our viewers. So I'm gonna start out with I know that a lot of people in the audience are students like me. So we want to know a little bit more about your personal journey. How did you get here? Like, how did you decide, or like, what led to you in this moment?
Okay, such a good question. And yeah, I guess I never had the amazing opportunity that all the Sage crew have. So I didn't get to take part in anything like you're all taking part in. So I think this is pretty phenomenal, and I'm just so honored to be here. But I did grow up with two parents who were doctors, who are medical doctors. My mum is actually a psychiatrist and my dad is a neurologist. So it definitely made me excited about science. But also I think I was a bit too frightened to become a medical doctor. And then when I was at school, I just had amazing teachers at high school. You know, I had an amazing chemistry teacher. I had an amazing physics teacher, but I actually also really, really loved art. So I know that you're also an artist, Joey, and that was really important to me when I was at school. So I was really unsure when I was kind of 16, 17, 18, what I was going to go and do at university and what kind of job I could have. I ended up going to art school for a year after I finished high school. So I did kind of physics, chemistry, and maths and advanced maths and art. I went to art school for a year. I lived in Italy for a bit and I learned about Renaissance art. And then I went back to studying physics. And then I just kind of fell in love with it. I guess it's like the kind of Sage projects that you get to do, you know, the research opportunities, the internships, like it takes science from being a whole bunch of equations and facts and turns it into something real. And when I started doing that, I was like, well, I just want to do this all the time. And then this kind of crazy thing happens when you're, you know, probably a few years after you start studying at university, where suddenly someone wants to pay you to do science. You know, they're like, okay, you've been paying enough. I'm going to pay you now. And here's the key to a lab with a whole bunch of really great lasers in, and that key's yours now. And you can just do stuff. And I love that. So I never had like a clear plan to do it, but it was just kind of discovering these things along the way. And I think the art, like your art, was really important to me in that. Have you seen like a connection between your art and your engineering?
Yeah, like a lot of engineering is like design, and I love to like think of designs for my future telescopes, and the art really plays into that. Like it's not just like making it pretty, but it's also like designing it. You
Making it
use what
functional,
you
like it
yeah,
has to
exactly.
work, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
I completely, I think like it was so important to me having that, like having that, this is how you make a really beautiful image, or this is how you present something to a different audience who wouldn't understand it, or, you know, this is how you put together an illustration to accompany a scientific paper. But in engineering, it's more than that, because you have to make a model that actually functions. I think the interplay between the two is so important.
Exactly. Yeah, I was so excited to start like talking to you for the Sage Live because I once I started doing a little research on you and I found out that you like started in art school and then you turned into the like STEM, like really dove into the STEM. I thought that was so cool because I used to really be want to be an artist and I still really like art, but like being in STEM and like being able to incorporate the two, it's just like amazing. And I think
We have some university degrees. So in the UK, we have we kind of do it differently a bit to America. So at high school, we have to specialize really early. So at the age of kind of 16 years old, we have to choose just a few subjects that we can study. Now, actually, if you guys were at high school in the UK, you're only allowed to study 3 subjects when you're 16 and 17. So that's really difficult if you want to do something like physics or engineering, because you have to take physics, maths, and advanced maths. It means you have no space in your calendar or your timetable to do art. But when I was at school, it was a little bit different. But at universities like Imperial, we have courses that are joint with the music college. So we have this Royal College of Music that's just next door. And there you can do a degree that's part music and part physics, or
wow.
part music and part maths. And it's just amazing. Like it's these extraordinary musicians who are also brilliant scientists and engineers. And I think we need more of that in society. Like we need people who can visualize or can create beautiful music, but also appreciate science and engineering.
That is so cool. So they study like physics and music at the same time. So
Yeah, it's
they're
like
like
your dual degree. It's like you
dual
doing engineering and applied science, but theirs is like maths and violin.
that's amazing. That is so cool. So basically, so you grew up around parents who started in like who had the career in STEM, and then you dove into your art, sort of the what do they call it, the left or the right part of your brain, and then
Whichever part of the brain it is, I went
yeah,
there.
either one, and then you discovered more about what you were passionate about, which was physics, and then that's just really cool. I'm just like in awe right now. A little bit nervous because you're so cool.
No, I'm not that cool, but I think it's like it's what people used to do in the olden days. You know, when you look at like the Italian Renaissance masters,
Yeah.
they could do like engineering, they could make these extraordinary cathedrals with these incredible domes, they could build these cities without computers, they could build these extraordinarily complicated cities and these huge churches, and they could do metalwork and they could do woodwork. And then we kind of lost it. You know, we had these artists who were also all of these extraordinary engineers. And for ages, hundreds and hundreds of years, if not centuries, people were doing that. And then suddenly society said science and art are really separate things. And we kind of lost that magic. And I think we need to go back to it.
Like somehow along the way, people just started saying, oh, these are two separate things. You can't be technical and like creative at the same time. That's what I used to think before, like a long time ago. When I was littler, I was like, oh, I don't know if I could ever like do anything in STEM because it's really, really technical and I don't know if I want to do pursue an entire career in that. I'll just stick to art. And then I finally realized like how much they're related and how it's not just one way or another. You can go both ways. Like what is
one of my coolest friends is a research scientist actually at the Molecular Foundry in Berkeley, and she's from Ireland originally and trained in the UK and then moved over to the Molecular Foundry. Her name is Sinead Griffin. But she has art shows. So she's also a painter and she has shows in galleries of her artwork. And then she's like this multi-award winning scientist who does all of this complicated work on materials theory and simulation of these mind-blowing materials with absolutely crazy properties. And then in her spare time, she's like a actual exhibiting artist. Like they're in California. Hopefully there are some in London as well.
That's so cool. That is so interesting. Awesome. So I think we can dive into part 2. I really want to know this part. So what do you do in your work today? What's the most like you understand? What are you working on now?
I honestly want to know what the optoelectronics, like what is that? Like,
well, okay, I'm going to do that part and then we're going to go to Zoe and she's going to tell us what optomechanics is. So I work in new materials for devices that light up or devices that absorb light. So things like new materials for the pixels, the LEDs inside our mobile phones or our television displays, or innovative new solar panels or biosensors or photodetectors. So optoelectronics means optical, combines the optical and it combines electronics. So for something like an LED, we might be pushing in electricity and then trying to get some really interesting material to be able to emit light. And in a solar panel, we'd be absorbing that light and turning that into electricity. So it's just kind of very similar device designs, but different materials that we might use for both. And the types of materials that I'm really interested in, they're called carbon-based semiconductors or organic semiconductors. So if you have one of the brand new iPhone displays or a Nintendo Switch or an OLED screen in your television, that O stands for organic because that's made out of these innovative new materials. And they're kind of based on some really interesting chemistry that was discovered in the early 2000s. So just before some of you were born, or a while before some of you were born. And these carbon-based materials were shown to act as semiconductors, kind of like inorganic semiconductors. So you've heard of things like silicon, probably everyone in this room has heard of silicon. But the idea, Yeah, Silicon Valley, but also the semiconductor that underpins pretty much all of electronics. Do you know what a semiconductor is, Joey? Have you done that?
I've heard it. I couldn't
Okay,
tell you
okay.
specifically what it is though.
Okay, well, I also put you on the spot, which is mean. But a semiconductor is halfway between a metal and an insulator. So a metal is something like a conductor that can conduct electricity all the time, and you're happy with that, you know what that is. And an insulator, like a conventional plastic, it's really hard to get them to conduct electricity because they have a really, really huge gap, which we call a band gap, between their conduction and their valence band. So if we push electrons in, we can't get them to hop up and we can't conduct electricity. Now, semiconductors have a really, really tiny gap. Making that jump from being non-conducting to conducting is really easy to do. So chemists, like in the early 2000s, discovered these really interesting carbon-based materials that could act as semiconductors. So we have the electronic properties of things like silicon, but the processing properties of plastics. So we can dissolve them, we can change their chemistry to control what color of light they emit or absorb, and we can put in kind of new functionalities. You know, they're biocompatible, they're really, really low cost. We can print really thin layers of them and then make flexible displays and things like that. So my job as a material scientist is to work with the chemists in our university to come up with new designs for materials that would make things like LEDs or solar panels more efficient. So to make a solar panel that generated more electricity, or make an LED that was brighter and more colorful. So I get to do really interesting experiments to take these molecules. I don't do the synthesis. I just draw out a nice picture on my computer and send it to the chemists and say, I think this would be a cool material to make. And then, you know, we workshop it a bit, and then they come back to me with a little bit of powder. Sometimes it's only 10 milligrams of material if it's been really hard to make. And then I take that into the lab. I process it into something called a thin film. So I turn what could start as a powder into a kind of thin solid state structure that would be the active layer of an LED or a solar panel, the part that's doing the interesting work. And then I try and use lots of different experiments to understand how the molecules are arranged in that thin film, how it impacts the properties, the electronic properties, and then how we can optimize that. And then eventually, after a few years of this, I'd go to someone who actually makes the display and I'd say, we've made a big breakthrough and you should incorporate this into your manufacturing. So it's really that kind of very exciting area of designing and developing a new material and then going to people who are actually making them into devices and saying, this is what we should do.
Wow.
But now, what does optomechanical mean?
Well, optomechanical, I guess, how do I like explain? Okay, optomechanical can mean a lot of things, but mainly it's like mechanics of, for example, adaptive optics. Adaptive optics is when they have a mirror and they use mechanics to sort of have the mirror be able to adapt to how the light is bending.
Okay.
And basically that's how most of what optomechanical engineering studies. There's a lot more, but that's one of the examples I can think of right now.
I guess it's, yeah, that makes sense, right? So the mechanics is like it's moving, something's moving, the lens is moving or adapting for some interaction with light.
The reflective mirror that helps it like focus down. It's able to like change because the light that comes in, it's not quite like straight. It's often uneven because of like the air in the atmosphere or clouds or something like that, and it needs like the that adaptive reflective mirror to be able
and you would use this in a telescope.
Yeah, I think a lot of telescopes. I can't name any, but yeah.
The future Joey telescope is going to use this technology.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it. I can imagine it now.
Cool. So, basically, I really want to know more about like what you specifically like research every day. Like, it is what you just mentioned. Is that what you're working on right now, or is there like a specific thing that you're focused on at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So because these materials have been around for a while, we're always looking for ways to try and be innovative. And that's like what probably everyone in here wants to do. You want to be the only person in the world doing an experiment, or you want to be the first person to make a discovery. And so we're trying to come up with new ways to give these materials new functionality. Like in my head, it's not that exciting if I'm just making TVs better. Like, I don't want to just make some rich TV manufacturer even richer. I want to come up with something new that these molecules can do. So what I've particularly been investigating at the moment is how to use the twist of a molecule, a property that we call chirality. Have you heard of the word chirality before?
Yeah.
Okay. And you kind of alluded to it when you said left and right. Okay. Dominique's like,
Never heard of it. Sorry, y'all.
Chirality is a property you've definitely interacted with. It's a property of symmetry and shape. And it basically says that you can have two objects that exist as non-superimposable mirror images, like your left and your right hand. So if you put your left and your right hand together, palm to palm, then they're kind of mirror images of each other. But if you try and put one on top of the other, they're quite clearly not the same. And we can see that kind of handedness in so much of the human made and the naturally occurring world. So we see it, you know, in anything we've made, like fusilli pasta or screws or our shoes or tennis rackets or scissors. They can have a handedness, right? The way that you hold it depends on the handedness. Or in fusilli pasta, the way that it twists will be clockwise or anti-clockwise. But actually, we see this handedness in subatomic things. So we see it in electrons that can be up or down. You know, when you draw out atomic structures, you draw a little up arrow and a little down arrow. And that's the handedness of the electron. We see it in light. So light can be right-handed or left-handed, clockwise or anti-clockwise light. And we see it in molecules. So molecules themselves can have this handedness. DNA is a really, really good example. All DNA in all naturally occurring life on planet Earth has one-handedness. It's all right-handed. All amino acids are left-handed. No one knows why. No one knows why life is selected for these particular chiralities. But actually, we found in optoelectronics world that we can use the chirality of these molecules, of these carbon-based semiconductors, to try and control the twist of light. So if I use these carbon-based semiconductors as the active layer of my OLED, and they're chiral, say they're all left-handed, then that OLED will emit twisted light. And that actually makes things really, really exciting. The cool added part is alongside emitting twisted light or absorbing twisted light, they also seem to preferentially transport electrons with one spin. So electrons that are up electrons would like to move through a left-handed material, whereas electrons that are right-handed down electrons would like to move through a right-handed material. And this is really extraordinary because it means that we can make electronic devices that don't only make use of charge, so we're not only pushing currents through it, but we can also manipulate spin. And that can do things that are really efficient, really low power, and really good for the environment. So we're working with these super cool materials, but instead of just changing their chemistry like normal, we're trying to think about giving them handedness, because then we can get to new properties.
That's so cool.
It's so cool.
I'm so like excited that you mentioned explained chirality, because I think that's just like one of the coolest things. Like,
right. So for your world, we know, when you look at distant galaxies, they often have that twist. So they twist clockwise or anti-clockwise. They have this spiral. And there's some evidence that more of the light that comes to us on planet Earth is twisted in one direction over the other. Like if there was no natural reason that life chooses for one-handedness, and then the light should come to us 50% clockwise and 50% anti-clockwise. But actually, we see an overrepresentation of one twist. So there's a lot of scientists all around the world who are trying to work out why. You know, they go out and they look at amino acids and sugars and proteins and all of these chiral biomolecules, and they collect them from things like meteors. There's a mission on Mars at the moment that's trying to look at all the organic molecules there to see if they still have this same preference. And everything they found says for life to naturally occur, DNA has to be right-handed and amino acids has to be left-handed, which is so wild that this really basic thing about us and about the universe, we still really don't understand. And every time I go to a science conference or a meeting, there's someone there who's like, I've got this zany new idea about it. And everyone's like, oh, it's such a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. Questions that are difficult to answer are really like intriguing, and that's the kind of stuff that I really like to like Google about and research about and like dive into the rabbit hole. So
it's such a rabbit hole. And when I ask a chemist to try and if you tried to synthesize, so if you tried to artificially make DNA in a lab or sugars in a lab, if you do it chemically, like, you know, you're putting the reagents in a pot and you're doing the reaction, then you always make 50-50. So if we try and do it, we always make 50-50. But if we, you know, did an extract of your DNA, it would always be right-handed, which is so bizarre. You know, our chemistry doesn't select for it. Life's chemistry does select for it. And so when I ask my chemistry friends to make me these molecules, they always make 50-50, like their reaction, their solution they get at the end will always be 50-50. So it's actually really hard for them to then separate those molecules out, because I only want one-handedness of it, right? I want to make an LED that's only emitting one twist of light. So they have to actually, it's so primitive. They have to take their powder, put it in a solution and pass it around this kind of system of tubes where it interacts with a column of sugar. And I told you before, sugar is all one-handedness, sugar is all right-handed. And these molecules will move past the sugar, and the ones that are the correct handedness will hold hands with the sugar for a little bit longer. They'll connect to one another. And then you can look at the molecules that come past this, and the first group that come out will be the ones that haven't connected to that. And the second ones, they'll be a bit slower, because they've held hands with that sugar. And so you'll be able to separate them. So companies who do this separation to make these really important molecules have this really basic way where they're like, hold hands with sugar, and then they collect it. And we still haven't found a better way to do it. So there's so many kind of opportunities for innovation and understanding really big fundamental questions about the origins of life. So you think you're doing like material science and engineering, but actually it's so much bigger than that, which is why it's so exciting.
That's so cool. That's so funny. Though when you said the it reminded me of when I used to do like little science experiments out of like soap and oil and water.
That's it.
And it would like separate.
Chemistry lab.
Exactly. Yeah, I had my little chemistry lab of stuff that my mom did not want me to mix together.
I remember those days. All of your mum's very expensive face creams and like that, and you put them into a pot.
You hit the nail on the head. Yep. All of mom's skincare stuff.
I think it generates great scientists.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to tell her. That's the point I was trying to make.
I'm going to put this on my college admission form one day, Mum. You'll be thanking me.
Cool. So now I wanted to like ask you more about your Wikipedia articles. I when I was doing the research on you, I was just mind blown. How did you make that many Wikipedia articles from scratch? I myself, I used to do a lot of like Wikipedia editing, and people would always like try to take off my edits and like correct it. And I was like, oh, but I'm just trying to help. So, did you face like any obstacles, or just how did you get to this many?
Yeah, I started editing a few years ago. Wikipedia, obviously, everyone here has probably used it. Maybe it's still early in the morning in California, so maybe you haven't used it today. But definitely everyone in the UK has used it already today. But it's this incredibly important knowledge source because it's kind of open source. It's non-partisan, so everyone trusts it. You know, irrespective of which political tendency you have, everyone goes to Wikipedia. And if you're kind of a child in a classroom, or if you're a college student, or if you're a university professor, or a researcher, or a policymaker, or a journalist, you use Wikipedia. So like you forget how vital it is to society functioning. But despite Wikipedia being really important and feeling really massive, you know, it feels like there's a lot of stuff on there. It has huge knowledge gaps, and particularly about women, and particularly about people from the global south or people from historically excluded groups in general. And that's because of a few reasons. Like the main reason is that Wikipedia editors kind of suck and they haven't done a good enough job of documenting the incredible contributions of women to science and society and history and knowledge. But also because society is really bad at celebrating their contributions. You know, we don't write books about women enough. We don't, well, unless you're Dominique's t-shirt, we don't put them in our media enough. We don't have them on radio enough. We don't have them on television enough. You know, we have these incredible women pioneers, but we're not doing enough to honor them. So I started, well, I got angry about this as soon as I learned that women were underrepresented on Wikipedia. It was kind of 2017 when I learned this. At the time, women were about 17% of Wikipedia biographies. So 17%, despite being 51% of the population, 17%. And obviously for things like physicists or engineers, that was even worse. So for physicists, it was about 12%. So I got really angry by that. And I don't like being just angry about something. I like doing something about it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'll just start editing Wikipedia pages or writing these Wikipedia pages. As you know, Joey, it's super simple to edit. Like you don't have to take any extraordinary course. You just press edit. And, you know, when you land on a Wikipedia page, usually you land on this tab that says read. But if you want to edit, you just press the tab that says edit. Like it's that simple. And it looks like a kind of it looks like a Word document. Like it's super easy to do. Anyway, I started writing these biographies in kind of over Christmas between 2017 and 2018. And then I was just like, I like routine. I like doing something every day. I like having this focus. So I was like, I'll just start writing a Wikipedia biography every single day. From the 1st of January 2018, and you know I've been doing it every single day since then. Wow. It's now the 14th of January 2023. I've written like I could check right now, but I've written over 1,850. And the kind of discovery process is just really addictive. I think it's like doing a sage camp, right? Like you learn so much. You come across these remarkable stories of people who sometimes have had really challenging journeys to get to where they're at. You know, sometimes if you're a scientist starting off in Africa, they may not have the facilities in your country to do the research that you want to do. So you're going to have to go further afield to do that. And then you might come to the UK, you might go to Germany, you might end up in America. But you learn like this extraordinary glimpse into someone's life. So like every night, I was learning all of these new areas of science, learning of all of these new places in these new stories. And I found it really addictive. It was really, really exciting. And then I was just doing that. No one was talking to me about it. I was occasionally sending them to my parents, like, hey, look at this cool neurologist, look at this amazing mathematician. And then, you know, eventually my dad would be recommending people to me, or people would come back to me and have ideas. But then once an American newspaper, the Washington Post, wrote this article about it a few months ago. And then suddenly everyone in the world wants to talk to me about Wikipedia. And I couldn't even be in the lab for the whole week or do any science because it was like I had to be on CNN at 11 p.m. and then CBS at 5 a.m. And every time I had to be this perfect advert for Wikipedia, like such an important website. And everyone edited it. So these stories are important. And, you know, one of the most kind of important things that's happened since is seeing these women that I write biographies of getting kind of recognition and getting honored, like seeing their stories. They were already remarkable. That's why I wrote their Wikipedia page, but seeing them getting celebrated in society, seeing them getting awards, seeing them presenting when the COVID pandemic started. I don't know if you all remember, but every single expert they had on television at the time was a white man. And I was like, this is so untrue. It's not representative of public health. It's not representative of epidemiology. It's definitely not representative of medicine. And so I started writing the Wikipedia biographies of women working on kind of the front lines and really helping to tackle this. And then, you know, a few months later, they're the ones on the news. They're the ones on the radio. So you just take these stories to an audience where everyone is listening and onto a platform that everyone uses, and then they go kind of huge. So I love that. I love the discovery and learning parts, but the part I love most is seeing people finally get that kind of recognition when they've really deserved it.
That's amazing. What an incredible service. You're writing these articles about these amazing women and people, and they're finally like getting out there and getting the recognition they deserve. I just think that's so inspiring and amazing. And you mentioned that like at the beginning, 17% of Wikipedia articles were about women and women in STEM. Do you know what the percentage is now?
It's like now it's climbed massively to about 19%.
Oh,
But that's because people, idiots, keep making profiles of men. I'm supposed to stop them. But actually, you know, it's not a great proxy because not everyone, you don't start a Wikipedia page with like Joey is a woman or Jess is, you know, you're using pronouns to infer their gender, which obviously isn't a great way to go. And then it's also why you can't actually get kind of data on ethnicities, because not many people would write on a Wikipedia page, you know, Kismekia Corbett is a black engineer, you know, you have to.
yeah.
So the data aren't perfect, but it's gradually increasing. It's certainly doing a bit better. And, you know, something I kind of alluded to before is one of the really big challenges of profiling people from historically excluded groups is that not enough places are giving them awards or writing about them. So
Yeah.
it's harder to prove they're notable on Wikipedia. Like your point, Joey, about when you started editing and people were like, no, you're not doing it right, and like canceled your edits.
And I would get in arguments in the talk page, and at one point I'd just give up because people are so like territorial of their articles.
They're so territorial, and also they like have infinite time on their hands. Like all of these Wikipedia administrators, I'm like, how are there like 28 hours in your day for you to critique every page I've put up? Like, get a hobby that isn't this.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I think when I've been talking about this, I've also like, if they're people who really should be on there, who've done really awesome things, but who aren't fulfilling those notability criteria, I try and to kind of journalists or people who are giving awards. I nominate a whole bunch of people for awards because then I can use that as a reference. So it's like it's because, you know, Wikipedia recognizes people who are notable, but it's easier to prove someone's notable if they're on Wikipedia. So you kind of have to do both sides of it. So yeah, I'm gradually learning how to take on those wiki trolls.
The wiki trolls, exactly. Take down the wiki trolls. Anyway,
but don't say that too loudly because they'll come for us.
Exactly. You're incredible. And I'm like 100% sure that I can guarantee you that like you will have an entire team of people like us and other Wikipedia editors who will start doing the same thing as you, and we can make that percentage go way up. And
something that everyone could do actually, like you don't have to write new pages, because sometimes, you know, you get home from college or you get home from the lab, or maybe you guys have much more fun lives than I do. And so you might have something to do every evening. But actually what you can do is translate pages. So English language Wikipedia is the biggest language Wikipedia there is, but Wikipedia exists in like 300 different languages. And in countries where they don't have access to printed resources like we do in North America, or how it is in the UK, Wikipedia is a really critical educational tool. So if you speak some language that isn't English and you could translate Wikipedia pages, then that's really, really critical. Once when I was getting really bummed out with taking on all of these trolls on talk pages, and you really feel like, you know, when someone criticizes something that you're putting all of your effort in, you're like, oh, that's so hard. Like, it's such a blow. And I was like, oh man, like maybe I shouldn't be doing this. It's like taking up all of my time, and, you know, these people are out to get me, whatever. And then I got an email from a young woman in Iran, and she said, you know, we have no access to popular science literature. Like, if a really great popular science book comes out, we either get it years after, or it's prohibitively expensive. Whereas you can go on Wikipedia and you can get that information immediately and for free. And I think like that, you know, it's great to see these people getting recognition and honor, but taking the stories of science and scientists to places that otherwise wouldn't have access to them is so vital. So even if you don't want to edit, but you could just maybe tidy things up or translate, then that's really, really powerful as well.
that's really cool. I'm so excited now because I speak French. So now I'm excited to start like translating articles into French. And all my multilingual people out here in this call or watching this on YouTube, you have a job now.
You can do it, right? French is a really interesting language though to translate into, because it genders jobs. So the word for engineer is like man engineer and woman engineer have different words. So sometimes I like try, because, you know, I'm not confident enough in different languages to translate automatically in my brain. So I try and use auto translate on Google if I'm trying to get someone who's non-native English. And every time, because Google's auto translate is horribly sexist, if it's a biography of a woman engineer, it will have like, you know, Joey is an engineer. He did this, he did that, he did every pronoun they put in afterwards, because the automatic thing in Google Translate or any translation tool's head is if it's like engineer, lawyer, anything like that, it must be a man. So it puts those gendered pronouns in even when they're not there. So it's so annoying, but also quite funny. And often also, because I write so often about women, scientists and engineers, but you know, there are extraordinary engineers and scientists of color who aren't women, but also don't get recognition just because they're African American, for example. And I have to really catch myself because I'm so used to writing she, and I go back when I'm reading their biography and I've completely got it wrong. so sometimes I'm a product of it, but the other way.
Yeah. Wow. So speaking of like advocating for women, how important is it for us, like as students or young women, like starting out early, how important is it for us to stand up for each other and speak out?
I think kind of obviously massively critically important. I think that, you know, beyond just women or people who get to experience the stage journey or anything, I think we all need to kind of stand together, right? Like we've seen it in the last few years, like everyone coming together to take on the climate crisis or to speak up against things like the murder of George Floyd, that activism, the Black Lives Matter movement. Like everyone coming together has so much more power than individual parts. So I do think it's kind of really critical that as a society we do that. But I also think like something magical about this connection, and also social media has done it for a lot of people, is you have access to these networks that otherwise were like closed doors to you and you had no idea about. Like probably when Dominique was training, certainly when I was training, we didn't have any of this, right? Like you were in the lab. If you were surrounded by men, that was it. That was your experience of science. You didn't have someone that you could just connect with on Instagram and be like, let me see how it is where you are, or like, I'm having such a hard day today. So I think that like can catalyze such change. Like you can say when you're finding something hard, or you can say when your voice isn't being heard and you need to be amplified. You can call in that support from people who aren't in your kind of immediate space. And that I think is really critical and vital. So 100% like uplift and connect and amplify each other, but use those networks when you feel a little bit lost. Phone someone up and say, I really want to talk to someone about this, because everyone's experienced that too. And I think kind of your generation more than ever before has that power of kind of connectedness to challenge those feelings. And I hope that you use it wisely.
Yeah, and it's really, I think it's really important for us to like validate those younger students, like maybe in elementary school or middle school, because as I mentioned before, I wasn't really sure if I could pursue something in STEM because I thought it was too technical, or I wasn't fit for that. I think it's really important to say like you can, like it's not just about like including like more women, and like it's a big part of that because you want representation, but these jobs are just so cool, and I just want more girls to like
you want to show
experience.
people how cool they are.
Yeah,
like, I think like you're lucky to be part of this. I was lucky to have parents who did this and also have that connection with teachers who were amazing. But probably speaking to your friends who aren't in Sage, or maybe even from your own high school experience, like most people aren't taught physics and chemistry or maths by someone who's really excited by physics and chemistry and maths. Like most people have rubbish teachers in these subjects because teaching doesn't value those kind of things. Well, no one in society values teaching enough. So we don't pay teachers enough. And because we don't pay teachers enough, you never get really great physics, chemistry, and maths teachers. It's so hard to find them because they can go off into any career, right?
And
like
that puts that
yeah.
it puts out like this spark. Like it doesn't, when you have a bad or like a not great teacher, it kind of like diminishes your excitement about it. Like a lot of people I know, they're like, they always, I hear the phrase, oh, I'm not a math person all the time. And funnily enough, before Sage, I used to be that kind of person. And then I met people who went to Sage who were excited about math and volunteers for Sage who like had a career in basically doing math and discovering these cool things about it. And I was like, you know what? Why am I so against this? Why do I hate math so much? Let me just take a look at it and see, like, try to understand it. And now, like, people make fun of me because I'm just like, oh my gosh, math is cool. Math is so beautiful. And it's amazing how like different my views are on it after Sage and after like hearing these people like actually doing it. And now I'm in Calculus 1B and I'm enjoying the heck out of it. And I am so excited to be in the class. And my professor, she's awesome. She's just like the kindest, most like the coolest person ever. And I'm so happy that I'm part of Sage as well, because if I didn't go to Sage, I wouldn't have had that realization. So yeah, sorry, I just kind of blabbed for a minute. But...
I loved it, and I'm hoping, I know that it was being recorded, but we can use that for an advert for maths. But I do think like definitely movies like Hidden Figures showed how like important, the movie about the women calculators at NASA who enabled human space flight, like that shows you like how cool applied maths can be. I think most young people's problem with maths at school is their parents are super biased about it because their parents probably got taught maths in a really boring way. So whenever they're at dinner, their parents are always like, oh, math sucks. And then you internalize that concept that maths is really hard, or that it sucks, or that it's not useful for anything. And then you go into the classroom and your maths teacher isn't getting supported enough by their school institution or the government. And so they're not that excited about what they're teaching, and they're not trying to link it to your real world experience at all, right? It's just like,
Yeah,
here's some
it's just
algebra,
like you're calculating
like,
numbers.
graph, bye. And then I think what we need to do is show how maths can be used, or how maths can be beautiful, and really kind of advocate for that. Because when you're at school, you just have no idea about all of these careers. You have none of that introduction, unless you're lucky enough to take part in this, or unless your parents are scientists or engineers, or unless you like happen to live next door to MIT. You don't know that's all going on. And we need to shift that narrative, because we're losing so many incredible scientists and engineers, and we've got so many big challenges to try and solve, right? Like, we have to come up with new vaccines, we have to come up with new medicines, we have to try and get people clean drinking water, we have this ongoing climate crisis, and don't only need people who can engineer solutions to it, but also really good communicators who can convince the public that they're important solutions. Like, we need so many new experiences and voices. And at the moment, our education system, mainly because of our governments, are really failing them. So I hope your generation can fix that, but no pressure.
No pressure at all. Yeah, no
pressure, but the climate is on fire. The world is on fire. California is flooding, but no pressure.
No pressure at all.
I just wanted to chime in and say that in the chat, we have people with very similar experiences to both of you. Malia saying she had the exact experience Joey had, and
yeah,
I
remember
and Sarah is also saying.
I remember that day on the bus, we were all talking about it. I was like, oh, I hate math. I'm just not a math person. And everyone was like, well, a couple of people were like, really? Math is so great, and this is, and this and that, and this and that. And it totally changed my mind. I think that's one of the most important like moments of probably my life, and that probably determined the rest of my career.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think one day you'll be using that when you become president of the American Mathematical Association or something. You'll be up there and you'll be like, I remember.
Sitting on the bus during Sage Camp. I'm definitely going to use that. Sage is just like, I couldn't be more grateful.
Well, that's great. And now, like, our responsibility, I guess, looping back to your question about what young women today can do, I think our responsibility is to give this opportunity to as many people as possible. Like, not everyone gets that privilege. Like, the reason that I started advocating for women scientists and trying to get other people to think as excitedly as you are about science was because I realized how lucky I was. Like, I was so lucky to have amazing teachers. I was so lucky to have parents who were like, you know, go off and do physics, even though my mum's convinced that physics wasn't invented when she was at school. So she actually, we were watching a TV program about gravity, and she was like, no one knew this when I was at school. Like, no one knew about these. I was like, I think you're wrong, but I think we won't fight about it. So I think, like, I realized I was super lucky, and actually, like, I had this responsibility to try and give other people that opportunity. So that's what you do with this chance. You try and take it to other people as well.
Cool. That is so
Sorry,
cool.
I Zoom crashed on me, but another question I had was, and this is also just going to some questions that are in the chat. It was really interesting what you said, how just how important it is to form connections, and how those Wikipedia articles, like from this one article, it goes out and it helps people get awards. And so one of Julia's questions was, have any of the women that you've written an article about reached out to you?
The coolest story by far is this amazing a mathematician called Gladys West. She was one of the mathematicians. She's got this extraordinary journey. So she was born in Virginia in 1930. She went to a historically Black college and university where she studied maths. And then she started working in a high school. She was a maths teacher in a high school before she joined, like, the Navy office and the US government to do the maths, the calculations to predict or to work out how the Earth was shaped. So for satellite technology to work, you really have to know about the shape of planet Earth. And like you all know, planet Earth isn't a perfect sphere, and you have to be able to work out how non-perfect it is. And Gladys West did the calculations for that. She was one of the first Wikipedia pages that I wrote. It was kind of February 2018. And I was putting together her biography from all of these different places, and she'd been huge in her community, and she'd gone on to do these incredible things. The maths she did eventually became the maths that underpins GPS technology. So kind of sat nav, Google Maps, whatever it is, it's thanks to Gladys West. A few months after I put her page up, the BBC put her in their top 100 women in the world. So she was on this list of the world's top 100 women. So then the page views to her Wikipedia page, it's like, you know, thousands an hour. And you get that information from Wikipedia, which is great. And then the US Air Force inducted her to their Hall of Fame. So she was like 89 when this happened. She then did a PhD, or finished her PhD by distance learning. So she became Dr. Gladys West. And then The Guardian, our big newspaper in the UK, our big national newspaper, did this whole profile on her that was like, Gladys West, the hidden figure who helped to invent GPS. So she's like on national media, she's getting all these awards. And then last summer, or 2021, June 2021, the Royal Academy of Engineering, which is our most prestigious, you know, Royal Family Engineering Society, awarded Gladys West the Prince Philip Medal and Prize, which is their most prestigious prize for engineering, and had never gone to a woman before. And it went to this African-American 90-year-old mathematician. I just felt like that was incredible. So every time I am anywhere teaching people how to edit Wikipedia, I show them the page of Gladys West, and I'm like, you know, this, it can be super impactful. But anyway, I was teaching some tech people, showing them how to edit Wikipedia. And I think it was one of those awful tech companies that just wanted to clean their images a little bit by contributing to making the internet better. But anyway, they said, oh, we'll do the editathon next week or whatever. And they scheduled this Zoom with me. And I just thought it was going to be a super boring Zoom. But it was actually a Zoom to introduce me to Gladys West. So we had this Zoom together. And her niece was conducting it all, because Gladys is like 91 now. But honestly, like at the time, the Queen was alive, and it was more important to me than ever meeting the Queen. Like, it was the coolest thing ever. I was just like, this is so cool. And so sometimes I get to connect with them, but through weird and wonderful ways. And actually now, like, the really cool thing about Gladys is now, like, her name, you know, when you see those lists of like incredible African-American mathematicians or like extraordinary pioneers in satellite technology, like her name is there now, like every time her name is there. And I was watching a television program the other day, and in it they were going into the kind of secret genius behind things like delivery apps, you know, like delivery apps that deliver all your food. And it was a very clever program. I think you'd like it, Joey. Anyway, they went into GPS and how the riders get around. And I was like, oh, they should cover Gladys West, but they'll never cover Gladys West. And then like a few moments later, I had Gladys West on the screen being interviewed from Virginia, like sitting there, like in her throne. And honestly, so I emailed her niece afterwards, and I was like, I was so happy to see Gladys West. And she was like, oh, this is so amazing. And she emailed me back. So sometimes sometimes I do get to speak with them. And they become celebrities.
That's so exponentially cool.
I'm
I know,
glad.
that is amazing.
Coolest thing ever.
Yeah, and if anyone is interested, Loy hooked us up and posted a link to that Wikipedia article in the chat.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
give it a
I'm gonna
click
check
and
that
look
out
at it.
It's so cool, right? And then if you click that link, you see like on the Wikipedia page down the side, you get this list of all the languages it's available in. So not only does it get, like, if I upload a page in English, like sometimes people expand it. There are amazing people who find photographs and things like that you can use it. But then this translation thing happens, and then you can go to much bigger. So the most amazing example of this was when I'm not sure if you'd have even started Sage, but do you remember a few years ago, there was that first ever direct image of a black hole, and it was the front of every newspaper, like the I'll get it. You'll probably all be able to Google it much quicker than me. But there was this image of
They
that
should
from
know
the
it because
Horizon
I'm pretty sure
telescope.
I printed it out for y'all.
Okay. You should all know what it looks like. It looks like a very weird kind of stain from a coffee cup on a black table. But it was this extraordinary feat of engineering and maths to be able to get this image. And the very young computer scientist who managed to make the kind of code possible to be able to image it was someone called Katie Bauman. And I remember reading about her over the course of the day, and there were all these incredible photographs of her looking at the image that they'd managed to accumulate and acquire from this telescope. She's like a slightly older version of you, Joey, but she managed anyway. And so I knew I wanted to write her Wikipedia page. And as soon as I got home, I wrote her Wikipedia page. And then overnight, it was translated into about 20 different languages, because it was like top news of everywhere. Everyone was so excited by this black hole image. So sometimes things happen remarkably quickly. So even though you can fault Wikipedia editors for being generally biased against women, they can turn things around super fast. So I just love that, like the connectedness of it all.
That is wild. That's amazing.
Okay, Jan Harvey wins because they've been to a talk by Katie Bauman.
Yes, and Jonavi actually had another question in the chat. I see you, Jonavi. And her question was, is there a story that you learned about while writing this Wikipedia articles that really resonated with you personally?
Oh, that's so interesting. Probably not one story, but like the accumulation of lots and lots of stories is that often, and probably everyone in this audience embodies this, but often people who are from historically excluded groups don't only do super awesome things in science and engineering, but they also have that kind of advocacy and service part where they want to give back to the community. Like, so usually, you know, if you're reading a biography of a scientist, it will just be like fact, thing they discovered, thing they did, blah, blah, blah. But if it's a woman scientist or an engineer of color or something like that, often they've been really involved in mentoring, or often they've had this huge legacy of training other women scientists and scientists of color. And that's the thing that kind of resonates with me most, that if you're from one of these groups that historically hasn't been represented or celebrated enough, you're not only doing that kind of extraordinary research, but you're also doing that part to uplift others. And I think that's kind of super cool. So there's this, an example, a very famous British woman crystallographer was someone called Dorothy Hodgkin. She described the crystal structure of vitamin B12 and all of these other really important biomolecules. And for people who kind of know what I'm talking about, crystallography is the science of trying to work out how atoms are arranged in molecules or in thin films or in structures. And you kind of shine a bunch of X-rays on them. You bombard them with X-rays at really bright light sources, like the ALS in Berkeley, the Advanced Light Source. So you bombard them with X-rays and you look at the way that those X-rays diffract or kind of scatter from the planes within that crystal. And you get these images back that tell you exactly where the atoms are in that crystal. Dorothy Hodgkin was really big on this, but she also trained most of the women crystallographers that existed in like the 1950s. And when you look through her history, her kind of legacy isn't only these huge contributions to breakthroughs and discoveries in science, but it's also in how she supported and mentored others. And I think, like, you know, it comes back to what me and Joey were saying before, like our biggest responsibility is to kind of pay it forward, and she embodied that. So I really love that.
That's so cool. So interesting. I'm just sitting here in awe.
Yeah, I went to a talk by a chemistry professor, a guy that I now work with at NYU, and he does this really cool imaging of really interesting material structures. He's got a beautiful lab in NYU, the chemistry department, and it's a really cool, it's a very Joey lab. At any time, not only does he have chemists there, but he also has an artist in residence who takes pictures of all the beautiful crystals. Like, it's so cool. It's so New York. Anyway, I was seeing him giving this chemistry talk about this research that we both do. And I looked him up, and he'd written this whole paper about the impacts of British women crystallographers. Like, his side hustle isn't only art, it's also understanding the history of science. And he'd done all of this extraordinary. So I was like, he's just the coolest person in the world. Like, I need to go and talk to him. So sometimes you find these stories in really wonderful ways.
That's so cool.
It looks like Angelina has her hand up. Do you have a question for us?
Yeah, hi, Miss Wade. So you've written like over almost 2,000 biographies and articles about diverse women in STEM, and you've done some like really cool things in the field of optoelectronics. So I just wanted to know, like, what's one thing you would like people to remember you for?
Oh, that's such a good question. What do I want people? I just completely top level for leaving the world a little bit of a better place than when I found it. You know, on whether it's Wikipedia or whether it's the science lab or whether it's, you know, at Imperial, the university I work in, I get to teach as well. I really love teaching new engineers and new scientists. Like, I just want to be remembered for someone who did something useful and did something to make the world better. And because I think that's the most important thing any one of us can do. What about you, Angelina? And then we're going to come to Joey.
That's kind of a hard question to think about. But I really resonated with your answer because I'm in like some clubs at school that are like prioritizing giving back and stuff. So I think that's also something that's really important to me too. But yeah, I also have another question, but that I can ask it after Joey goes.
Yeah, let's get Joey do her answer.
Well, I really want to be remembered as one of the people working on, well, hopefully, ooh, this is a tough question. Well, I want to like, oh my gosh.
It's hard, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to remember you as someone who is building super awesome telescopes and has a poster of Young Gravy on the wall behind her. Because I never heard of Young Gravy. In the UK, gravy is a condiment or something that you might pour on a roast meat.
Yep.
And now I'm going to remember it as a rapper, and that is thanks to you.
Yeah. Love Young Gravy. What can I say? Cool. I'm so glad I'm going to be remembered that way.
Angelina, we'll come back for your question now, your other question.
Yeah. So earlier when we were talking about like your work today, you mentioned that you like help design and test new materials. And I know like every day is sort of different, but can you walk us through a day in your life at work and when you're not at work?
Yeah, okay. I mean, every day is completely different. And you know, so sometimes if the chemist's synthesis has worked well and we get new materials or powders, we try and start off by processing them in the beginning of the day, mainly because some of the processes that we have require you, if you've only been given like a few milligrams of material, you have to be really careful when you're weighing it out. So you have to do that before you have any coffee, because if you're like, then you may spill over their powder that's taken them like 4 years to synthesize. So I start off by trying to make the thin films in the beginning of the day. And there's kind of 2 ways I might try and do that. So sometimes some of these materials, they don't like to dissolve in very nice solvents. So we have to evaporate them in a vacuum. So we put them in this vacuum chamber and we kind of gradually heat up the little pot that they're in. And then we make those powders turn into a gas. We make them do a process called sublimation. And then those powders, little molecules of those powders will fly up onto a substrate and make thin films up there. Anything that you have to process like that just takes a little bit longer, because you have to put them into this chamber, methodically and carefully clean every surface, and then pump down and then do your growth. So that could take, you know, half a day or a day to get right. If you're in the other lab, the kind of wet lab, then usually you just chuck it in, dissolve it really quickly. But again, we have to make sure that these environments we're in are really, really clean. Because we're working with molecules and we're working with kind of nanoscale synthesis and characterization. So anything tiny is going to impact it. So there we work in a clean room. So depending on whether I'm in this vacuum lab or in a clean room, then it might take me half a day to be able to make and prepare the samples. And then I'd spend the next couple of days doing experiments to try and work out exactly how the molecules are arranged and how I can make them better. So that could be with microscopes, it could be with some spectroscopy instruments, so shining a light on them and seeing how they absorb or emit light or scatter light, or it could be with some electronic testing, so seeing how good they are at transporting electricity. Obviously, that kind of generates a huge amount of data. So you definitely need to spend like a couple of days after that, really sitting down at your computer and thinking like, what is going on? Like, I can't say to this thin film, how are the molecules doing in there? You know, you tell me. I have to look at a graph and try and work it out. Or sometimes I have to run a simulation on my computer to try and predict what that kind of graph is telling me, to try and put some molecules on a computer and try and predict exactly what the spectrum would look like if they were arranged in that way. So sometimes you do some simulations to complement the data. So like a typical week is 2 or 3 days in a lab, and then like 2 days at least of where you're kind of really looking at that data and trying to work it out. But then at the same time, because I work in a university, you also have to do things like teaching or mentoring other students or having meetings with your students. I don't know if you have it in Sage, but we do these things quite regularly called a journal club, where we like present, someone from the group will present a scientific paper and then go through the paper and take everyone else in the group through it with them. And you talk about what you like and what you don't like, and what's really worked and what's really clear and what could be explained a little bit better. But I love that. I love hearing about other research and then discussing it as a team. So you have a bunch of meetings. They're usually really exciting. But the main part is this research and this analysis.
That's really cool. I tried to understand most of the sciencey part at the beginning, and I got some of it. So don't worry, I got some of it.
It's like chemistry, though. It's like you playing with your mum's lotions and potions. Like it's like I just get to play with these little milligrams of powders that are colorful and light up and absorb light. Or sometimes, like next week, we have time at a synchrotron. So the ALS, the Advanced Light Source in Berkeley, is this. Have any of you ever been there? This kind of big donut-shaped building where they accelerate electrons really fast. And when those electrons are going really fast, they emit X-rays. And then we use that to investigate materials. We have one in the UK. It's not quite as glamorous as coming to California. It's in like a really rubbish village near Oxford. But we're going there next week. And that means that you have kind of, I think we have 48 hours to just do science. Like it's like 2 days nonstop. You have to schedule your sleeping and your, you know, who's on shift when, and you just use as much of those X-rays as you can to investigate your materials. So sometimes you're not in your own lab, you're in someone else's lab, and you're just trying to collect data so that you can work something out. So really every week is different.
Oh, cool.
Now I can ask Joey, what's a typical day like for you, Joey?
Oh my gosh. A typical day for me is going to community college, coming back and doing homework. And then sleep.
Okay. Do you not ever watch TV?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Well, I watch a lot of documentaries on famous telescopes, my favorite being the one on Hubble on Disney Plus.
Okay.
Not advertisement. Oh, I also volunteer at the observatory every third
Amazing.
Friday. Shameless
Amazing.
plug. Come visit me. Foothill Observatory.
Angela,
Where is
do you have
it?
another question?
If I imagine a map of California, where is it?
It's okay. Here's California, and it's
Got it.
bad posture. I'm right here in the corner of my mouth. Right at the corner. I think.
Okay. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Angelina, did you have something else you wanted to ask?
Yeah. In addition to like obviously writing a lot of Wikipedia articles, what do you like to do in your free time, or like what other hobbies do you have?
Oh, that's a really good question. Do you have a life, Jess? Is the resounding question of that. So I like cooking, which lends itself naturally from the chemistry. I have a little goddaughter. My friends have a little daughter, and she's my goddaughter, and I like going and hanging out with them. I like doing sports. I like running and swimming. And also I really like going to art galleries. So we have a lot of really beautiful art galleries in the UK. If you guys ever come to visit, the remarkable thing about the UK compared to the US is that everything is free. So all of our art galleries are free to go to. All of our museums are free to go to. And so we have an extraordinary opportunity in a city like London. You could be in a different exhibition every day comfortably for a few months, and you never see the same thing twice. So I really, really like doing that. And I should say reading, but really I edit Wikipedia more than I read. So that's a bad thing to say. But I like hanging out with my goddaughter in art galleries and cooking.
Cool.
Yeah, I think if you come to the UK, it may be quite expensive to fly, but once you get here, it is cheaper to enjoy culture.
It's amazing. I can't even like fathom an art gallery that's free. I've never heard of that here.
Or a science museum that's free, or a Museum of Natural History that's free.
That's amazing.
I think it's like being in, I think DC is the same, right? DC, most of your art galleries and things like that are free to get into.
All right, I'm going to jump in. I see that Genevieve has her hand up. I think this is going to be our last question as we are nearing closer to the end, but take it away, Genevieve.
First of all, I just want to say it's really cool, the work that you've done, because I think similar to Sage's, you found something that has a really huge impact, like a niche area that hasn't been explored, and you really like expanded on it for Wikipedia. So thanks for that. Secondly, my question is more curious about how people find your articles, because oftentimes when I like Google something, it's because something came up in a conversation, I want to learn more about it. But if people don't have an awareness of female scientists or minorities in science, how do they like come across your article?
That's a really good question. And it comes back to actually Joey's point earlier about jumping in a rabbit hole when you start reading about something. Like, the beauty of Wikipedia isn't that you do a Google search for Gladys West. It's that you're reading about GPS, and then there's a link and it says the mathematician who developed this was Gladys West, and you click that link. Like, the beauty of Wikipedia is getting lost in those rabbit holes, and you keep clicking and discovering. So my hope isn't that, I publish a book which is 5,000 women, incredible women scientists. It's that people just get these stories kind of subtly. They just find out like, oh, it was a woman who did that, or like, it was an incredible African scientist who discovered that structure. Like, I think that's the best way to get people to appreciate that this is just normal. It's not extraordinary that there's a woman mathematician who did the calculations to enable GPS. It's extraordinary that we have to keep saying it's extraordinary. So I really like the idea that people just find it really subtly. And something that happens immediately when you make a Wikipedia page, if you put one of those info boxes on it, at the right-hand side of a Wikipedia page, you often have that box that has like a photograph or like some really simple facts about that person. That kind of gets indexed by Google very fast. So it forms that knowledge panel on the side of Google. So if you've Googled someone and it's come up with that knowledge panel, it's probably because they have a Wikipedia page. Because anything on Wikipedia goes to the top of any search engine search really quickly. So I like that kind of thing too. I like that you're kind of, watching the news or reading a newspaper article. You might be having your breakfast and you just kind of look through and you see that there. So yeah, I never want to kind of, I want to shout about how awesome these people are, but I don't want to be like, this is an amazing woman who's done this. I want them to find like naturally and subtly these stories, so it just becomes normalized.
Awesome. And I think that is all the time we have. Unfortunately, I could sit here and talk to you all day.
I know, I want to learn more.
Telescopes.
We'll have to do the sequel. Joey will bring a telescope.
I'll
Dr.
be
Wade.
interviewing Joey. I'll be interviewing Joey about
my
this.
There
gosh.
you go. There you go. We'll put that on the books for Sage Live. But thank you. I just want to say, please, everyone, give a big thank you to Joey for being a fabulous moderator and guiding us through this conversation. And a big thank you to Dr. Wade as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for, I know we're all going to go on Wikipedia and do and research and learn about women scientists. And yeah, everyone was very excited about the explanation of chirality. I hope I'm saying that right.
Perfectly.
So thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Guys, thank you so much for
Jess.
everyone else for joining us for this Sage Live. Just as we wrap up, don't forget to follow us on social media. All the information is right there on the screen as you see it. Sage Live is on the second Saturday of the month. That means the next Sage Live will be February 11th, and the topic will be, drum roll please, space-related sciences. I don't know what that is. So you gotta come back next time and figure out what we're going to be talking about. So feel free to subscribe to our channels to help us reach out to other students like you, grow the community, grow the Sage network that we've got going on. And the Sage contact information is down there as well, info@mysagejourney.org. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again in February.
See you.